action, 15 rounds for the world's heavyweight championship.
New York, Yankee Stadium, June 22nd, 1938. 80 years ago this month, a boxing match is about to begin. This is no ordinary contest. The whole world is watching.
Weighing 193, wearing purple trunks, outstanding contender for heavyweight honors, the former heavyweight title holder, Max Schmeling. Weighing 198 3/4, wearing black trunks, the famous Detroit Brown Bomber, world's heavyweight champion, Joe Louis.
The German, Max Schmeling, had beaten Joe Louis 2 years earlier. The African-American is after revenge. But on the eve of a world war, this fight is about much more than that. I've boxed, and while it is about landing a punch on your opponent, it's also about becoming your opponent, going inside, watching, waiting, anticipating. Boxing expert Steve Bunce.
If you get 70,000 people inside a venue and the stars are out at ringside and in the sky, and you have as the prize the World Heavyweight Championship, but as the backdrop this ring as the ring of hate, and one guy who's given Nazi salutes and dined with Hitler, and the other guy who's this humble guy that came from a shack, the country boy made good, and it's the ultimate good v evil fight. And at the start there's 20 people in the ring, then it thins to 10, then it thins to just 3, the referee and the boxers. And then the referee moves to a corner, the boxers go back to their corners, and at that point when it's illuminated with those ropes and the smoke is swirling in the air and there's 70,000 people taking a deep breath, at that point of the ding ding, I've got to tell you, there's no feeling like it.
Boxing is said to have come to the United States from England in the late 1700s. By the 1800s, it had rooted itself in large urban areas such as Boston, New York City, and New Orleans. These were English and Irish fighters. But for African Americans, most born into slavery, fighting became a way to status and a way to freedom, to the manhood denied them by racism, although they were not in control of the sport, its promotion, or its profit. In this program, I'll be telling the story of the 1938 fight between Joseph Louis Barrow, known as Joe Louis, and Max Schmeling, two great fighters who were more than just human beings. They were the symbols of an era.
I listen to all you prize fighters who don't want to meet defeat. Listen to all you prize fighters who don't want to meet defeat. Take a tip from me, be off Joe Louis's beat.
Joe Louis was born in Alabama on May 13, 1914, the seventh of 8 children. His parents were Monroe and Lily Barrow. Monroe was a tall man, 6'3", hardworking, but he suffered from mental illness, and when Joe was 2 years old, he was placed in an institution. He never came home. Believing her husband dead, in 1920, Lily married widower Pat Brooks. Like so many other poor families, they moved north to Detroit. Joe's son, Joe Louis Barrow, Jr.
Well, the family moved north because, unfortunately, his stepfather, Pat Brooks, was on the other side of the county one night, and he was coming back, and the Ku Klux Klan stopped him, and they were going to do whatever the Ku Klux Klan did, probably hang him, or certainly beat him up. But one of the Klan's members knew Pat Brooks, and he said, that's Pat Brooks, let him go. And at that moment, Pat Brooks said the South was not a place for him to rear his children and extended family.
His mother, Lily, keen to broaden her children's education, decided to introduce Joe to music.
My grandmother was giving Joe Louis 25 cents each week to take violin lessons. And then his friend Thurston McKinney felt that he was too large of a man or boy in those days to spend 25 cents on violin lessons. So he said, for that same 25 cents, you can rent a locker at Brewster Gymnasium. So my father did. So one time, my father came back to his mother, and his mother said, "Where's my 25 cents, Joe?" And that's when my father fessed up that he was running a locker in Brewster Gymnasium, and boxing was where he wanted to turn his attention to, and not the violin. And so my grandmother said, whatever you do, Joe, just be the best at what you're going to do.
Boxing was always a way out of poverty for American boys. Irish and English lads took up the noble sport, but for African Americans, it was especially important. Boxing is pure physical prowess, and brains too. But the body is king, and if you could dominate the ring, riches and fame and a kind of freedom were yours. And the legend was John Arthur Johnson. Jack Johnson, the first African-American world heavyweight boxing champion. He was rich, and he was famous, and he took no guff from white folks. They considered him to be the most notorious African-American alive, a 100% bad boy, and a total legend. Author David Margolick.
I think that black boxers were viewed as perhaps almost too good for the white establishment. The white establishment was still reeling from Jack Johnson, and so they kept their distance, and they withheld the heavyweight championship crown from black boxers. They didn't want black boxers participating in the upper reaches of the boxing establishment.
By 1933, the 19-year-old Joe Louis had made a name for himself and had acquired two managers, Joe Roxborough and Jack Blackburn. They drew up a list of rules their young fighters should live by. 1, never have your picture taken alone with a white woman. 2, never go to a nightclub alone. 3, have no soft fights. 4, never gloat over a fallen opponent. 5, never speak negatively about an opponent before or after a fight. 6, keep a solemn expression in front of the cameras. 7, live and fight clean. Why this list? So that he would be the opposite of the flamboyant Jack Johnson and maybe get white people to like him too. And quite simply, so that Joe Louis could stay alive.
They realized that he had a very short leash in white America, and that it was important that he behave himself and not give the white establishment any kind of ammunition to hold him back. His behavior had to be beyond reproach.
Joe Louis trained hard, and it paid off. By the age of 20, he had acquired a huge following and a nickname, the Brown Bomber. Louis had had 18 wins, 14 of those were knockouts. He now needed a more formidable opponent. A fight was arranged in New York with the Italian Man Mountain Bruno Canera, a former heavyweight champion. David Margolick.
His advanced publicity was so strong, and the sense of anticipation was so great that the porters at Grand Central Terminal carried him off the train. He was already a hero, but New York had not seen him yet.
Bruno Canera, former circus strongman from Italy, and Joe Louis, the sensational young heavyweight from Detroit.
In the ring, Louis was merciless. At one stage, he lifted Canera off the floor. "Hey, I should be doing this to you, the Italian protested. 40 years later, Canero recalled the fight.
I got a bad cut over my right eye, by a big gash there. So I had to stop the fight in the 12th round too. He was a clever fighter, a fast fighter, young kid from fire, and really good one.
Canero tells the referee he can't go on, it's all over. Joe Louis the winner by a TKO in 2 minutes and 32 seconds of the 6th round.
In Harlem, hundreds of people ran into the streets to celebrate the victory of their new folk hero. And that party lasted all night. Joe Louis speaking in the early 1960s.
Canero was a very important fight for me because of my first fight in New York. It meant that if I got over Canero, that I will be on my way to bigger things.
After the Canero fight, many white sports writers resorted to their usual racist imagery when describing this new African-American boxing star.
He is a splendid, vicious male animal, completely destructive. Lewis's handlers remind me more of animal trainers than fight managers. They gentle him around until feeding time and fighting time, and then they turn him loose.
Now, the racism was the same, but something in the boxing world had changed. For the first time since Jack Johnson, an African-American boxer had a chance to reach the top. David Margolick.
His smashing victory over Canero was just one more step along the road to the heavyweight championship. Whatever political or racial reservations there were about Joe Louis were trumped by economics, and people realized that Joe Louis was going to be an enormous moneymaker for everyone.
Boxing expert Steve Bunce.
Every single thing he did in the ring has meaning. When he moves his feet, if you look at it, you think, how did he move? He didn't move anything, but he's suddenly gone 3 feet to the side. He's suddenly gone 3 feet back, and that's what the finest fighters do. And if he had a man hurt, half hurt, or even dazed, what would follow would be a blur of 3 or 4 punches with that man inevitably toppling. And they did go like trees. They did scream timber as these guys collapsed, especially some of the big guys. And he fought a lot of big guys, men that were giants, not just then, but giants now.
In Berlin, the day after Joe Louis beat Bruno Canero, a German boxer by the name of Max Schmeling read the accounts of the fight with interest and some concern. If he wanted to be world champion, he'd have to beat the bad boy from Detroit. Joe Louis had created a renewed interest in boxing in the United States. There had been nothing like him for 30 years, and Max Schmeling had done the same in Germany. He had been inspired to take up boxing by a fight in July 1921 between American Jack Dempsey and Frenchman Georges Carpentier. At that time, the contest was the biggest event in American sporting history.
Carpentier with the stripe down the side of his trunks, now on the left, and Dempsey advancing from the right.
Sports writer Patrick Myler.
This was a massive fight worldwide. It was the first $1 million gate in American history. And when Max was taken by his father to see this film, he was absolutely captivated by the sport. And he pestered his father to take him to a club so he could get going.
8, 9, 10, and out! And Jack Dempsey remains heavyweight champion of the world.
Unfortunately for Max Schmeling, his ascent coincided with the rise to power of Hitler and the National Socialist Party, the Nazis. They wanted sport to be an integral part of their political revolution, the primacy of white Northern Christianity. On August 26, 1934, Schmeling fought fellow German Walter Neissel in front of a crowd of 90,000 fans. Schmeling beat him in 9 rounds. German magazine Box Sports said,
"It is Germany's greatest day of fighting in terms of sporting and publicity value, the high point of German boxing history. The evening may have brought about a different image abroad of the new Germany and its leader."
Maiken Umbach is professor of modern history at the University of Nottingham.
Hitler writes very interestingly in Mein Kampf about boxing. He makes a very interesting comparison between boxing and fencing. Fencing, of course, had been a sort of elite ritual in the student fraternities. It was a rite of passage if you wanted to join the civil service, the hierarchy, the establishment of Germany in the 19th century and through to the early 20th century. And Hitler singles this out as a symbol of everything that's wrong with the old Germany. And he then says boxing is a great alternative. It's earthy, it's authentic, it's not elitist, and it trains people in having the kind of physical strength and power and resilience, and he recommends this as a great school for the nation.
Soon after becoming chancellor, Hitler invited Max to dinner and asked him to tell the world how peaceful everything is here. Hitler later sent Max and his wife Annie a wedding present, and when he was on the verge of going to prison for alleged currency fraud, Hitler ordered the charges to be dropped. But Max Schmeling was no Nazi, although he was happy to give the appearance of being a loyal citizen of the Reich. This balancing act was often put to the test. For example, Max had an American Jewish trainer called Joe Jacobs. The Nazis wanted him fired, but Max refused. However, Joe didn't always make it easy for Max. When he fought the American Steve Hamas in Hamburg in March of 1935, everything went well, until the end of the contest. Patrick Myler.
Schmeling won the fight decisively, and at the close of the fight, Deutschland über alles was sung by the crowd. And Schmeling did his duty, gave the Nazi salute with the outstretched right arm. And Joe Jacobs are probably wondering, what should I do in this situation? But he winked at Schmeling and he raised his right hand, but he kept the cigar, his ever-present cigar, in his fists. And there was an uproar at this when the press reported on this was an insult, an absolute insult to the Nazis by not doing the proper thing with the salute.
One newspaper, in a front-page editorial, described it as a despicable insult by a Jew toward our Führer. By 1936, neither Max Schmeling nor Joe Louis were heavyweight champion. The man holding the title was the American James J. Braddock. Joe and Max would have to fight for the right to take him on. This is Max speaking in 1967.
In this time, there was a new man coming up in the States, Joe Louis. He was, they called him the Brown Bomber, and he beat everybody. He beat Maxi Bear, he knocked him out, he beat Canera. He was called a Wonder Man.
That is possible for us to completely grasp what a revolution he was. Here was a heavyweight with the grace of a much lighter fighter. And his modesty, his sheer grace and beauty in the ring was something to behold.
Schmeling is down. The count is 5, 6, 7, 8. The men are in the ring. The fight is over.
That is possible for us to completely grasp what a revolution he was. Here was a heavyweight with the grace of a much lighter fighter. And his modesty, that is possible for us to completely grasp what a revolution he was. Here was a heavyweight with the grace of a much lighter fighter. And his modesty, his sheer grace and beauty in the ring was something to behold. That is possible for us to completely grasp what a revolution he was. Here was a heavyweight with the grace of a much lighter fighter. And his modesty, his sheer grace and beauty in the ring was something to behold.
And Schmeling is down. The count is 5, 6, 7, 8. The men are in the ring. The fight is over. Max Schmeling is beaten in 1 round.